You're watching the Intel Network Builders V-Summit series. I'm Guy Daniels, Director of Content at TelecomTV. To continue our series on network security, we're going to examine the evolution of network cybersecurity to meet stringent US government requirements of keeping 5G networks safe. The National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence comprises a group of collaborating vendors, including Intel and Dell. And joining me now to discuss the NCCoE's goals and to give us a status update are Steve Orin, Federal CTO and Senior Principal Engineer at Intel, Chris Cavaggioli, Xeon SP Platform and Technology Product Manager at Intel, and Dan Carroll, Field CTO, US Federal at Dell Technologies. Hello everyone, thanks so much for taking part in our discussion today. To start us off, Dan, could you give us a brief update on the state of the industry?
Yeah, absolutely, Guy. It's been interesting. If you've been reading the news, you've seen that there have been a large number of increased attacks on critical infrastructure, as well as a lot more ransomware attacks coming across the news. That in combination with the executive order that was released in May, you've seen a renewed interest around the long-standing practices of trying to drive good cybersecurity within organizations, and an understanding that the federal government isn't the only part of a critical infrastructure solution.
Sure, thanks for that, Dan. And Chris, what's the industry doing about this?
The industry has always been looking into creating secure systems in 3GPP and all that stuff, but specifically the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, have established the National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence, and within that or NCCoE, there's the 5G Cybersecurity Project, which is basically getting industry leaders together across a whole vendor chain to put together a notional architecture and write documents on how to keep 5G networks safe. And this is going on right now where the NCCoE is looking at critical network assets and data privacy. They're working a vetted reference architecture as a deliverable, and specifically going through 5G use cases and demonstrating in a lab and confirming that what they're putting together will actually work. And this will go through a phased approach where we start with a notional architecture and work on it, but also an iterative approach so that when new security technologies come along, they can be added in as well. And this will keep pace with the industry.
And which companies are involved in this 5G cybersecurity work?
Yeah, there's a handful of companies all across the vendor chain. And today we have Intel and Dell here. We're providing the CPUs and Dell's providing servers, but there are a bunch of other companies, Cisco, Palo Alto Networks, Nokia, Mytek, AMI, Keysight, AT&T, T-Mobile, and Cable Labs. But we're all working together. And the good news is that we have the vendor chain here, we have end users, and together we're working in a lab to confirm that what we're doing is actually working.
Great, thanks, Chris. Dan, turning back to you, what is Dell doing in terms of security that reflects this key industry concern?
Sure. Yeah. What's interesting is, like I mentioned in the opening, there is a growing concern around cybersecurity and how that relates to our critical infrastructure, which doesn't just stop at federal systems, but reaches into commercial and state and local systems as well. Right. So with the executive order on cybersecurity, when you look at the sheer amount of bad actors out there, right? The only way that we can succeed is through collaboration. Dell Technologies, US Federal, looks at NIST and their Cybersecurity Center of Excellence as a key resource in establishing standards and frameworks for community use to help improve cybersecurity practices. I really believe where NIST shines is in their mission goals around driving adoption of new technologies. 5G is a transformative technology, right? We're going to see huge implications from it from every aspect of the customer network, from the edge through the cloud and into the data center. The 5G project Dell and Intel are collaboratively working with NIST is to establish a strong reference architecture for the secure deployment of 5G. In order to support that capability, we're actually working several projects within NIST related to stuff we're doing around our supply chain and secure component validation on separate projects with NIST that we have published news releases on that connect back to this project. So they are a great partner and a great collaborator to help try to bring guidance to the industry.
Thanks, Dan. And Steve, turning to you now, what is the expected outcome of all this work?
Well, thank you for that. And as Dan mentioned, this collaboration with NIST and at the NCCoE is going to produce an industry-driven reference architecture, fully built and tested in the NCCO lab. What this leads to is publications like practice guides and reference designs that will influence both government and the government adoption of 5G, as well as industry best practices for deploying 5G networks and solutions going forward that are secure from the get-go.
And Steve, obviously this is going to be dynamic. So how will the NIST Notional architecture evolve to stay ahead of ever-evolving cyber threats?
Well, that is a great question. And the reference architecture and the technologies underpinning it leverage work that's been done and validated by NIST and the industry partners around things like secure boot and secure runtimes, policy-based workload provisioning, and other efforts that NIST has been developing with the industry. Additionally, these efforts that we are building today include security providers like Palo Alto Networks and others, and Cisco, working together as part of the reference design. So we're building security in from the beginning. For example, this infrastructure uses Intel secure boot technologies like converged boot guard and TXT, or trusted execution technology, for establishing trust in hardware, which lays the secure foundation for the higher level security controls and policies that are being deployed on it.
Thanks, Steve. And Dan, what's the current state of the secure network definition at the 5G lab?
You know, what's great about these collaborations is they adjust. They adjust based on the realities of what's going on in the world. I'll give you a perfect example of that. The President's executive order on cybersecurity was released during the development of this project, right? So we had started down a pathway. We had well-defined goals, but with the release of the executive order, we wanted to make sure we were aligned with that vision as well, right? So NIST is a key advisor into the U.S. federal approach to cybersecurity, and they wanted to ensure that they took into account zero trust principles, which you're hearing a lot about coming out of the executive order. That means ensuring that the solution components and overall architecture take that into account. We have to have assurance, and we are making sure there's assurance around the critical aspects of device, user, transport, application, and data trust, right? All defined within that zero trust principle model. Dell's contribution for the 5G project leverages Dell's PowerEdge servers with the previously mentioned security contributions of Intel to deliver a capability to employ those pillars of trust I mentioned.
Thanks, Dan. And finally, Steve, how is this collaborative work you've been talking about, how is it impacted by the recent US government executive order that we heard from Dan?
So the executive order lays out a requirement for the US government and its suppliers to have security for the software supply chain, as well as a plan for implementing zero trust, amongst many other requirements and details that are laid out in the executive order. This NIST effort was already laying the foundation for implementing a risk-based approach to 5G security and how to deploy security controls that can align to a zero trust approach and zero trust architecture. As the zero trust architecture and the various associated controls and policies are developed, the NCCoE reference architecture and design provides a foundation that can illustrate how you can leverage these controls and policies into a 5G network environment and deployment.
Great, thank you, Steve. Great point also to draw our discussion to a close, for now at least. Thank you all very much for participating and giving us the updates. So don't forget to watch the other programs in this Intel Network Builders vSummit series. We've got a fireside chat with Dish that looks at the critical importance of security in the rollout of 5G, and a panel discussion with Palo Alto Networks on enterprise-grade security for service provider networks. And as well as security, this series also takes a detailed look at vRAN, Edge, and the network core. For now though, thanks for watching and goodbye.